Good morning, grade 12. The lesson that we are doing today is a combination of some revision, but there is also very important new work that we are doing. So it is important that you work through this lesson and that you listen to this lesson. All right, so the focus of today's lesson is that we are going to distinguish between the individual business and the industry. The first little bitty that we are doing now is revision. Okay, so when we refer to the industry, okay, if we talk about the industry, we are talking about all the firms that produce the same product. All right, if you look at the picture here at the bottom, the industry would be this one, okay, the big picture, and then all the little businesses that falls inside of that industry. So the industry is made up out of all the producers of a particular product and all the consumers that are wanting to buy that product. So if we look at the output of the industry, we are basically going to take the sum of the output of the individual firms. So if this, for example, is our cupcake industry, to calculate the output of the industry, in other words, the market supply, the total supply of the industry, we are literally going to add together the output of every individual business in here. So if this business is making 10 cupcakes, and this one is making 20, and this one is 30, and that one is 40, etc., etc., to get the output of the industry, we are literally going to take this one's 10, plus that one's 20, plus that one 30, plus that one's 40, and that one's 50, and that one's 60. We're going to add them all together, and then we have the output of the industry. Right, now some industries have a large number of participants, while others have only a few, some even just one. Okay, if you think of the different market structures that you did in grade 11, the perfect market and monopolistic competition, they have a large number of participants. Others have only a few, that would refer to the oligopoly, and some will just have one producer that makes up the whole entire industry, that would be your monopoly. Now, the number of firms in an industry, the number of the participants in an industry will influence the market power of each individual producer in that industry. All right, and remember we said market power refers to the ability to influence the price. That was in activity 6.2. All right, so if a firm has market power or if it doesn't have market power, that depends on the number of firms that exists in that industry. The general rule of thumb is that the fewer firms there are in an industry, so the less producers there are in an industry, the more market power those firms will have. We already said in the previous lesson when we looked at the perfect market that each individual producer in the perfect market is a price taker because he has no market power. All right, the reason why no single firm in the perfect market has market power is the fact that there are so many producers in this market. Remember, our focus is still the perfect market for this whole chapter. Okay, and we said in the perfect market there is many buyers and many sellers. So the mere fact that there are so many firms in this industry, that is what makes them to have no market power whatsoever. Remember, in the perfect market, they are all price takers. They cannot change the price. They have no market power, which means nothing they do can actually influence the price. All right. Now, if we look at this graph, this is revision from last year. We did this exact same graph in grade 11 as well. Okay, if this circle, the blue circle, represents the industry or the market, and each little black blocky inside of here refers to an individual producer. Now, in the perfect market, the price is determined through the interaction between market demand and market supply. All right, so as I said, this industry is made up out of all the sellers, every single person selling and producing and selling a cupcake is part of this industry. And if we take each individual industry, if we take their total output and we add it all together, that gives us the market supply. If we take every single buyer in this industry, every single person buying a cupcake, and we add together however many this person is buying and this person is buying and that one is buying and that one is buying, we add them all together, we are going to get the market demand curve. All right, so in the perfect market, prices are formed through the interaction of market demand and market supply. You can no longer just say demand and supply, all right, because now we distinguish between what is happening with the market or the industry, and we look at what happens to the individual producer in this industry. The individual producer is a price taker. He can't do anything. The price is determined here in the industry. All right. So if this represents the market demand curve, remember the market demand curve will always have a negative slope because the law of demand says the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. This blue graph represents the market supply curve, which will have a positive slope because the law of supply says the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. Where your market demand and the market supply curves intersect, that will be your market equilibrium, and the market has decided the price will be P1. All right, the function of this market is to determine the price. Demand and supply will determine the price. Okay, once the price has been determined, the market's job is done. Then each individual producer, okay, this represents the individual producer, we said that each individual producer is a price taker. They cannot influence the price. Because of this, in the perfect market, the demand curve, this pink demand curve, represents a perfectly elastic demand curve. So for the individual producer, in the perfect market, its demand curve will be a horizontal line at the level of the market price. So again, market demand and market supply has determined that the price will be P1. If the market says the price is P1, my individual producer is going to take this price, they accept this price of P1, and at this price level, the demand curve will be perfectly elastic or horizontal. All right, so they cannot change the price. Nothing this individual producer does can change the price. All right, all they can do is decide on the quantity that they are willing to sell at this given market price. So this market price, they are a price taker. The market determines the price. My individual producer takes this price, accepts this price, cannot change this price, can merely decide how much output he's willing to sell at this price. Okay, so whether he produces Q1 and he sells Q1, it is going to be sold for price P1. If he decides he wants to sell Q2, it's fine. The price is still going to be P1. He's a price taker. He cannot change that price. All right, so this is just the discussion of the graph that I already have discussed. Okay, so I said to find the demand curve for the industry, we need to add the individual demand curves for a particular product. Okay, so remember I said that each individual that is wanting to buy a cupcake, Pity and Yanni and Sunny is buying cupcakes, we are going to add whatever Pity is willing to buy, plus what Sunny is willing to buy, plus what Kwissy is willing to buy, plus what whoever is willing to buy. We add them all together, and that is going to give us the market demand. All right, so we add the individual demand curves horizontally to obtain the market demand. I'm quickly going to explain that to you. All right, let's say this is, okay, at each price level, this is Pity, this is Sunny, this is Kwesi, and that is Yanni. Okay, so if the price for a cupcake is 10 Rand, Pity is willing to buy 2 cupcakes. Sunny is willing to buy 5 cupcakes. Kwesi is willing to buy 1 cupcake. Yanni is willing to buy 3 cupcakes. Right, if the price goes down to 9 Rand, Pity now wants to buy 3 cupcakes. Sunny is buying 7 cupcakes because the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. Kwesi will now buy 2. Yanni will buy 5. If the price goes down to 5 Rand, Pity is going to buy 8 cupcakes. Sunny is going to buy 15 cupcakes. Kwesi is going to buy 7 cupcakes. And Yanni is going to buy, let's say, 10 cupcakes. All right. If I say we are going to add them horizontally. All right. So if we look there, we say that we add the individual demand curves horizontally to obtain the market demand. All right, so if we now wanting to calculate the market demand, right, for 10 Rand, what we need to do is we're going to add the 2 of Pity plus the 5 of Sunny is 7, plus Kwesi's 1 is 8, plus Yanni's 3 is 11. So the market demand will be 11 cupcakes. At 9 Rand, we are going to add Pity's 3 plus Sunny's 7 is 10, plus Kwesi's 2 is 12, plus Yanni's 5 is 17. And then lastly, at a price of 5 Rand, to get the market demand, we're going to take Pity's 8 plus Sunny's 15, that is 23, plus Kwesi's 7 is 30, plus Yanni's 10 is 40. All right, this is what I mean when I say horizontal summation. Each individual consumer, we are going to add them together at each price level. How many for Pity, how many for Sunny, how many for Kwesi, how many for Yanni? Add them together, that is the market demand. How many for Pity at 9 Rand, and for Sunny and for Kwesi and for Yanni, we add them together to get the market demand curve. All right. Our focus for now is just going to be on the demand curve. Okay, we will talk about the supply later. All right, so the market demand curve shows the total quantity of cupcakes that will be demanded at every single price level. Okay, and remember I said the demand curve will have a negative slope, just like any other demand curve that we have done up to this point, because the law of demand says the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. All right. How are prices formed? You'll see we're talking about the industry now. Okay, we're going to go to the individual just now. For the industry, this is how we're going to obtain the demand curve. Horizontal summation of all the individual consumers to give us the total demand curve, the market demand curve for the industry. On the industry, as I said when I did the graph, the main job of the industry is to create the price. Okay, so the industry's market price is determined by the interaction between the market demand curve. Make sure in your textbook that it says market demand and market supply. You cannot just say demand and supply, because now we have the demand and supply for the industry and demand and supply for the individual business. Okay, so which one are you talking about? All right, so prices are formed through the interaction between the market demand and the market supply. We saw that in the graph. The market demand, as I said, has a negative slope, and the market supply has a positive slope. This is the way it's always been. And then where the two graphs intersect, that determines the equilibrium price, the market price, which in this case was P1. All right. Now, as I said when I explained the graph above, that is the job of the industry. Once the industry has determined a price, the industry's job is done. Okay. Now we're going to look at the individual business. All right. So we're going to first look at the demand curve for the individual business, okay? Now we said in the perfect market, there are many buyers and many sellers, okay? And because of this, each individual producer controls only a very small part of the industry, all right? He is a price taker, okay? Each individual producer represents only a teeny tiny part of the industry. He controls a very, very small part of the market, which means he is a price taker. He is so small that he cannot influence the price at all. He accepts the price as a given. All right, the market will determine the price. Each individual producer will take that price and accept that price. And then all he needs to do is he needs to decide on the quantity of the product that he is willing to produce at this price level. Okay, now because each individual producer is a price taker, that means the demand curve for the individual producer will be a horizontal line, a perfectly elastic demand curve at the market price, which in this case was P1. Okay, now we said yesterday, or the day when we did the second lesson, that the individual producer will not be able to charge a higher price, okay, because in the perfect market there is perfect information. All the consumers, the buyers, know what the market price is. They know that products are identical, and they know that the identical product at the market price will be available from many, many, many other producers. So if our individual producer tries to increase the price above the market price, okay, so if our individual producer says, I don't want to charge P1, I want to charge P2, he is going to have no customers. Okay, and what is important to remember also is that each business wants to maximize profits. So this individual producer wants to make as much profit as possible. He cannot do that if he sells nothing. All right, he cannot increase his price higher than the market price because of perfect information. All of his buyers will know they can get the exact identical product from somebody else at the market price of P1. Why would they pay P2 just to buy from this individual producer? And each individual producer will know this, so they will not increase their price. Then the individual producer will also not charge a lower price. That would be irrational, okay? If everybody else is charging P1, why on earth will this individual producer be willing to drop his price? He's able to get P1. Okay, he can get P1. Why would he be happy to receive P0? Remember, in a normal situation, the demand curve would have a negative slope. So under normal circumstances, we would say, if he decreases his price, it's going to increase his quantity demanded. But in this case, that is not true. The demand curve has a horizontal slope. All right, so it's not a case of decrease your price in order to increase your quantity demanded, okay? It will not happen in the perfect market. This individual producer wants to maximize his profit. So if he's able to get P1, let's say 10 Rand, why would he accept 5 Rand instead? Everybody else is getting 10 Rand. He also wants to get 10 Rand. All right, now very important, the difference here now. If we look at the marginal revenue, okay, remember we said in the first lesson of this chapter, your marginal revenue is the extra revenue that the individual producer can earn from selling just one more unit. Okay, so if we are talking cupcakes still, the marginal revenue will be the extra income that we can receive if we sell just one more cupcake. All right, now you must remember we are talking about the perfect market. In the perfect market, the price is constant. Okay, you can see in this table, the price is constant. Okay, so the marginal revenue, okay, if we say the marginal revenue is the extra income that I'm going to get from selling just one more cupcake, okay? If I have sold no cupcakes, and remember the price is constant, that is important, okay? In the perfect market, the price is constant. So if I've sold no cupcakes and I sell my first cupcake, okay, I sell my first cupcake to Lerotu. Right, what is Lerotu paying me? She's paying me 10 Rand. I had no revenue. Now I have 10 Rand because I sold one cupcake. So my extra revenue is 10 Rand. My marginal revenue is 10 Rand. Now I decide, okay, fine, I don't want to sell just one cupcake. I want to sell another cupcake. So I sell another cupcake to my Cindy. Okay, how much extra revenue did I get? My price is still 10 Rand because my price is constant. So the extra revenue that I'm going to receive is another extra 10 Rand. Okay, and if I sell another cupcake to Caitlin, Caitlin is also going to pay me my price, which is 10 Rand. So my extra income is going to be another 10 Rand. And if I sell another cupcake to Kanisile, I'm going to get another 10 Rand. Okay. In the perfect market, and only in the perfect market, your marginal revenue will equal the price. Okay, because your price stays constant. If my price is 10 Rand, every single time I sell another one, I'm going to get another 10 Rand and another 10 Rand and another 10 Rand because my price is constant. Okay, so only in the perfect market, my marginal revenue will always equal to the market price. All right, and then remember in the very first lesson we said average revenue is always equal to the price because quantity times price gives me total revenue. So if I take total revenue divided by the quantity, it is going to give me the price. All right, so average revenue is for all market structures, your average revenue is always equal to the price. Okay, so in this case, because we said your marginal revenue is equal to the price, that goes without saying now that the marginal revenue is equal to the average revenue, and both of them is equal to the price. And because the price is constant, my MR and my AR will also be constant. Okay, my total revenue will increase or decrease as my output increases or decreases. So if we look at this example, the units is the quantity, okay? This is your output, okay? Output or my quantity, all right? The price, because this is a perfect market and they are price takers, remember they cannot change the price, so the price is constant at 10 Rand. So if we calculate the total revenue, we're going to take price times quantity. So 10 times 100 gives us 1,000. 10 times 110 is 1,100. 10 times 120 is 1,200, etc. If we calculate the average revenue, now because we can see the price is constant, we know for all the market structures, average revenue is always equal to the price. So because the price is 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, my average revenue will also be 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. But if you have to calculate it, just to make sure, you're going to take your total revenue divided by the quantity. So 1,000 divided by 100 is giving me 10. 1,100 divided by 110 is going to give me 10. 1,200 divided by 120 is going to give me 10. Okay. And then with marginal revenue, the calculation is change in total revenue over change in quantity. A lot of you are not listening. You are taking total revenue over quantity. There's a difference between average revenue and marginal revenue. Okay? Change in total revenue over the change in quantity. So we technically cannot calculate the first one. So if we calculate the change in total revenue, it is 1,100 minus 1,000, which means the change in total revenue is 100, divided by the change in quantity. So 110 minus 100, which is 10. 100 over 10 is where this 10 comes from. 1,200 divided by 1,100 gives me 100. Divided by the change in quantity, which is 120 minus 110. So 100 over 10 is going to give me 10. Now, if you see that the price is constant, you can see this is a perfect market because the price is constant. So in a perfect market, we know the marginal revenue equals the price. So if you remember that, you don't have to calculate the marginal revenue. All you need to do is look at the price. If the price is 10 Rand, you know that your marginal revenue will also be 10 Rand. But you can only assume this in the perfect market. And how do you know that this is a perfect market? The price is constant. Okay, so if we put this information on a graph, okay, there's my demand curve. Remember, to plot the demand curve, you take price and quantity. So there's my price. If my price is 10 Rand, my quantity is 100. There's 10, there's 110. Okay, in 120, the price is still 10 Rand. Or at 130, the price is still 10 Rand. Okay, because your price is constant, remember we said each individual producer is a price taker. So if the price is 10 Rand, the individual producer's demand curve will be a perfectly elastic horizontal line. And because the price is constant, D is the same as average revenue, is the same as marginal revenue. So this one horizontal graph shows us demand and average revenue and marginal revenue. But this is only true for the perfect market. If we plot the total revenue graph, you'll remember from last year and also from the first lesson, your total revenue will always start at the point of origin, because if we sell nothing, our total revenue will be nothing. And then obviously the more we sell, the higher our total revenue will go. And this graph will go up and up and up and up until the heavens above. All right, you can look at your total revenue. The amount is increasing all the time because my price is staying constant. And at the same price, I'm selling more and more and more and more and more. So as my quantities are increasing at a constant price, my total revenue will always increase. All right. So important to remember, the demand for the individual business in the perfect market is a perfectly elastic demand curve, a horizontal line at the level of the market price. And then your market price equals the average revenue equals the marginal revenue. So that perfectly elastic demand curve is also the average revenue curve and is also the marginal revenue curve. Right, that is your demand curve for the individual business. If we now look at the supply curve of the individual business, okay, this is something that is very important for you to know, okay? When we look at where to find the supply curve for the individual producer, we need to find the marginal cost curve and the average variable cost curve. These two curves will help us to find the supply curves. Okay, the rule is, and this is something that you must remember, the individual firm's supply curve is the upward sloping portion of the marginal cost curve that is above the average variable cost intersection. I'm going to show you on the graph now. Okay, you should remember from last year in grade 11, and if you don't, I'm telling you now, and then you remember it from this point forward, your marginal cost curve always intersects your average variable cost curve at its lowest point. Okay, so if I just jump ahead to the graph, here's the three graphs put together, okay? Remember, we said your average cost and your average variable cost curves, they have the same shape. Both of them are U-shaped, shaped like a bowl, okay? And the marginal cost curve looks like the Nike swooshy, all right, like a tick, all right. Now, your marginal cost curve must always intersect the average variable cost and the average cost curves at their lowest points. Okay, when we draw this, we are going to practice this. Okay, next week when we get to the drawing of the graphs, we are going to be practicing this. Okay, now your marginal cost, as I said, always intersects with your average variable cost at its lowest point. The reason for this is that the individual business will only produce if the price is higher than your average variable cost. This is your shutdown rule. We did the shutdown rule also last year in grade 11. Okay, we are going to revise the shutdown rule next week as well. But the reason why a business will not supply at a price lower than the average variable cost is because of that shutdown rule. If a business cannot cover the average variable cost, it will shut down. Okay, the price, the minute that the price is lower than the average variable cost, the business will shut down. It will not be willing to supply anything at prices lower than the average variable cost. All right, so to find your supply curve, right, we need to look at your average variable cost and we look at the marginal cost. Now, I said that your marginal cost will always intersect with your average variable cost at its lowest point. You'll see this graph is not 100% accurate because it's very difficult to draw these graphs on the computer. When we physically manually draw them, I am going to show you. It's supposed to always intersect at the lowest point. All right. But now, there where your marginal cost curve intersects with your average variable cost. You'll see I made a bulletjie there. That is your S. Your supply curve is the upward sloping section, okay, there, of your marginal cost curve after the intersection with average variable cost. So above the intersection with average variable cost. All right. So this part of the marginal cost is not a supply curve. Obviously, this is not because it has a negative slope. Remember, your supply has a positive slope. But this little section here of your marginal cost is not part of the supply curve because the firm will shut down at that point. Okay. This cannot be part of the supply because the business will not be willing to supply anything at prices this low. They will shut down. All right. So the rule is to identify your supply curve. It is the upward sloping section of marginal cost, but only above the average variable cost. So from there to there, where it says marginal cost, that will be your supply curve for the individual business. Okay, there's your rule. How do we find the supply curve for the individual business? The upward sloping section or portion of the marginal cost curve, but only that part of it that is higher than your average variable cost. Okay, now very important, we said that in the individual business, every individual business is a price taker. They cannot change the price, okay? So if the price in this case is now P, the only thing that this individual producer has to decide is which quantity he is willing to produce in order to maximize his profit. And this is a rule that if I wake you up in the middle of the night and I ask you, what is my profit maximization rule? Without even thinking twice, you must be able to tell me profits are always maximized where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Always. We are going to look at this profit maximization rule later on in this chapter next week in detail. But for now, you need to remember Profits are maximized where marginal revenue and marginal cost is equal. So if we put that on a graph, okay, you'll remember the market will determine the price here on the side. If the market says the price is P, our individual producer will take this price P, and the demand curve is a horizontal, perfectly elastic demand curve at this point. And this one horizontal graph represents your demand curve, your average revenue curve, as well as your marginal revenue curve. If we add your marginal cost curve, the Nike swooshy, all right, there where your Nike swooshy, your marginal cost intersects with my marginal revenue curve, that point E is your profit maximization point. This is where, remember, when two graphs intersect each other, that is where it means that this marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal at this point. That is what an intersection means, okay? So this point E is your profit maximization point, because this is where your marginal revenue and your marginal cost intersects. And 90% of understanding your graphs later on in this chapter and for the rest of your life is being able to identify your profit maximization point. Always profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal, there at point E. So very important that you know your profit maximization rule. Profit maximization rule says my profits are always maximized in all market structures where my marginal cost and my marginal revenue is equal. It looks a bit different in different market structures, but the rule doesn't change. Profit maximization rule is where MC equals MR, always.